Dave? No.
Dave was sat on the laptop earlier. So.
Oh, Dave. Yeah, sorry. Wrong pussy.
You might have a different one sat later.
Right, we're back on. And we're live on YouTube as well. Right, so there was a couple of questions from Jenny. Is Jenny still on?
Jenny, yeah.
Yep.
So,
yeah, Jenny's here.
I've bought the S2K with eye-back springs, and it's on 7.5 Js up front and 9.5 J on the back, and they're catching the wings. Does anyone have any thoughts on Olin's DFV and their lowering springs? Current setup is standard dampers. And any recommendation for a good coach trimmer in West Sussex?
Coach trimmer as a group, want to answer that, or would you like me to?
I don't know the answer.
Can you hear us, Ian?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah. I'll answer if you, in my perspective, if you like, and then if someone knows, otherwise, we'll do the easy one first. Although I live in, I don't know of any good trimmers. So I know going back towards Essex way, where I'm from originally, I could recommend a couple. So if you want the further journey, or if you're willing to do the further journey, I can share those names and people I've used in the past. But for this county, Touch would not have had the to use it yet, so I can't help you with that one. Just run the specs by me again. So you're on eye-back lowering springs on OEM shocks, I'm guessing. So that's going to be around a 35mm drop. And is it the front or rear that's catching? So you said you had a 9.5 J on the rear. Is that, have I got that right?
Question that was on.
Was it a post or was it
it's the rears.
Rears. Catching on the, I'm guessing the tab at the back, or is it catching on the inside of the arc?
No, it's literally catching on the tab on the side, on the rear quarter, on the offside and near side quarters.
Yeah, sure. If your question is not happening, so obviously right from the start, if you've got the correct offset, so you've told me the width 9.5, but the correct offset, S2000s, I'm sure you've figured, very, very difficult car to get the correct fitment wheels for because of the offset they run. They nearly twice as much offset than you'd find on something like a Skyline or a Supra or something like that. So the easiest things to do if you want to get rid of the rubbing is you can actually roll these tabs, which is exactly what you think it is. You kind of bend them in and bend them up. So they still mount and they still hold the rear bumper in, but it just gets this lug out of the way. Assuming you want to keep the same ride height, which I think is the question you'll need to develop a bit more about, whether you want to have coilovers, Olin's, DFV, as you said, or Bilstone or anything else. If you roll the tab, that might fix it. If you change the width of the tyre, so on a 9.5, you probably run a 255 width tyre. You might run a 245 just to bring the shoulder in a bit, but different manufacturers have different sidewall profiles in terms of profile, not the thickness itself, but the angle they take. So you could try a slightly narrower tyre with a bit more of a stretch that would bring the tyre shoulder in and away from these tabs. If you didn't do that, or you didn't want to do either of those things, I'm not sure if you were online earlier, if you would run more rear camber, as in more negative camber, should I say? I know that sounds like a double negative. You'll bring the bottom of the wheels out and therefore the tops in. That will also move it further away, but you've got to think about things like tyre wear and handling. And if you really, really didn't want to do any of those things, then I would say just raise the ride height and keep it clear of that tab. Does that answer at all?
Yeah, because I mean the back tires are they're the Yokohama AD08Rs, so they're pretty square tires anyway. So they're still running on the 245s, not 255s, and they just when you're bombing it down the road or something, and then you hit a slight bump, it just catches.
Yeah. I use AD08Rs myself, and they are, I would say it depends. I don't know exactly how you drive or whether you do any track time, but if you can probably go to something like a Michelin with if you went to a Pilot, there's different ones. There's PS4s, there's Pilot Super Sports, and then there's Cups right at the top end of their spectrum. But you might find that even if you went down to maybe a 235, if you're running a 245 at the moment, you'd have broadly the same level of grip because of the tyre compound, and you might not have any of the rubbing issues as well. Is something to consider. I mean, it was a great time, and as you say, it does have that very, very sizable style. A lot of Japanese performance tyres, which don't have them the same.
Yeah,
if that's a solution. But you asked about coilovers as well. Obviously, they won't change the wheel positioning fundamentally unless you drastically get them right. Everyone has their own brands. I like KW. That's a preferred brand for the S2000 that I've put on and I like. But there's lots of different ones. So, but if you're running standard shocks at the moment and you like that ride height, you could achieve that without adjustable coilovers. You could run something like a back spring, and you wouldn't necessarily have the height adjustment whether you want it or not, but you would save a lot of money because you mentioned Olins and they are very, very expensive. So it depends what you want to spend.
They're very good though, Olins.
Yeah.
They've got a really good reputation.
Well, on the S2K forum, I mean, there's plenty of guys in the States that have the Olin setup, and a lot of people just swear by it. Like you say, it's either the KW version 3s or the Olin's DFE.
Yeah, there's a third one. So Bilstein PS9, I think, is the one. That's another. All the high end sort of road and track coilovers you might go for. But if you're running quite a wide tyre on the rear, whether that's for aesthetic reasons or for grip, I don't know. But I don't know if you're running more power or something. But the arch roll or the tab rollers are very common. Again, there's pros and cons to do both, but short of running more aggressive suspension alignment than you perhaps might want, they're the only sort of physical adjustments you can make, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're just going to ask, has anyone got any more things that they're keen for us to show them? We do have a brake caliper, I think, that we can show you. Maybe some of the key issues that
right.
I just wanted to point out as well that Jenny wasn't Jenny. He's obviously using your
Ray,
other
actually.
half. It's Ray.
Yeah.
They're all saying Jenny. Sorry, Ray.
Yeah, it's just my wife's login on the
Yeah,
computer.
your wife's login. No problems.
That before.
Oh, sorry, it's Saturday. It's my
what are you guys going to see then?
name.
We have a few people like that on here.
Right.
I have a technical question about that.
Yeah, go for it.
It's to do with valve adjustment. You talked about it this morning.
Yeah.
When you come to do the clearances, on my previous cars, I've always tried to go on the tight side for the intake and loose side on the exhaust. Is there a danger of doing the same with the S2000? Because I know when they give you the specs.
So yeah, good question. They do. I do this. I'm mostly a metric man, but for some reason, whenever I talk about valve clearances, I do it in imperial. I do it in inches or thousandths of an inch. So for some reason, I'm going to do that again today. I can't tell you what it is in millimeters, but so for S2000s, the standard clearance is 8 thousandths of an inch to 10 thousandths of an inch on the 11 thousandths of an inch on the exhaust side. It's a feel thing for anyone who's ever done the job. You actually use, if you didn't know already, you use feeler gauges, and when you're checking the clearance, you're feeling for a certain amount of drag. It shouldn't be tight. It shouldn't be hard to pull the feeler gauge out of the gap. But equally, if you can feel that movement, that slack, you're only going to get when you're only going to feel when you come to do the job. That's probably not right either. So if you had to choose, safe us, depending on a number of conditions, to run a looser clearance and tight.
Yeah. So I was going to say, Ian's just saying some people have got some problems with the feed. I'm running this through the Wi-Fi at the moment, but I'm thinking maybe what I'll do is just switch over to 4G, and I think that was working better last time. So I'll do that now, and then we'll answer the question.
Yeah, I think it was better.
Yeah, my rural Wi-Fi is shocking, so it's probably mine.
Right. So
did you guys hear any or all of that before it went funny?
Most of it. I think basically what I was asking is, would you go on the range of 8? On the range of 8 to 10, would you go 9 for intake, or would you go 10?
This is going to sound like a politician's answer. I'd go for the right one. So no, if basically when you're using your feeler gauges, you've got a no and a no-go gauge. So in this instance, if you set at 9 thousandths of an inch on the inlet, allowing for a bit of slack and very minor things, because remember we're talking about thousandths of an inch.
Yeah.
I'll get the tool. So if you use this tool, for example, chair, Andy.
No, I'm just going to balance the.
So I use this tool when I do valve clearances. So it's nothing too fancy. It's a 10mm head and it has a screwdriver implement in it.
Yeah, I've got
that on the valve. Loosen it. Turn the lock the thread in the lock nut to whatever you're setting to, and then tighten it up. With the best will in the world, even the most delicate hands, you're going to put a little bit of weight on the valve. You're going to close the gap.
It's tightened up.
So if you set it at 9, and also when you tighten this, it's more. I actually tend to counterhold the screwdriver, because if you don't, you'll turn the flat screw with it and close the gap. If you set at 9, you'll probably end up with a tight 8, which is absolutely fine. If you go tighter than 8, the risk we're talking about a lot more than that, but the risk you run with overly tight clearances, especially if you're not particularly fastidious with your maintenance, is you can actually, when the engine expands up to temperature and the clearance is gone, you can inhibit your valves from closing completely. Now, we're talking very, very small amounts here. On the inlet, it's one thing, but on the exhaust side, it's another, because it's a very hot gas passing.
You can burn valves out, can't you, and stuff?
You can burn a valve out, you can burn the seat, exactly. Yeah, it sounds like you already know. So the valve, when it contacts back in with the cylinder head, it uses that mechanism, that process, to discharge its heat. And if you stop it closing, not only do you create a gap where it can't do that, you also might even keep the cylinder not in full compression. You could even allow for a small gap that the exhaust will continue flowing past even after the valve is closed. So it's better to run a looser valve clearance. Will make a little more noise, but it tends to be safer than a tighter one. So I would use a 9 to set on your inlet, and you shouldn't be able to get the 10 in unless you really force it. And use a 10 to set on the exhaust, and you shouldn't be able to get the 11 in unless you force it. If that makes sense.
Yep, thanks.
But valve clearances are one of those things. The Honda spec, I think, says do it every 60-something thousand miles, 64,000 miles. That's very long. I tend to do them every other year on my car, but I do probably over-service the car. But try and half that gap if you can. 3 years, 36,000 miles is probably a good time to do it, unless you track your car a lot. If you're hard on your car, you should do it more.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. It was a good one.
Right. Any other Q&As for Dan before we maybe start looking at something?
What would you like to look at?
So I think we got 2 ideas, unless anyone's got any other suggestions. So Dan can sort of talk you through the key service points around the car. That shouldn't take too long. Or we've got a brake caliper that we can show you. Show you the key issues with that.
Can you do unblocking the drain holes for the roof?
Oh, yeah, good shout. Yeah, let's just show everyone where they are.
Yeah.
Right. So Dan, and then tell us what the problem is here first.
Right. For the best demonstration, what I would do normally is run water through the drain holes. But we're in a garage and I'd rather not do that because I'll end up laying in it afterwards. So I'll show you the main things to watch out for when the main drain areas are. So at the front of the car, you don't tend to have to worry about drainage up here so much. So any water that... Put your wheel down, so no, I'm going to knock that out.
Yeah, that's fine.
You don't have to tend to worry so much. So under this scuttle panel, incidentally, is also where you find the pollen filter or the cabin air filter, but we'll come to that in a minute. So rain runs down off the windscreen, down there, and out, and exits out from under the... I'd have to go underneath to show you, but
yeah,
these don't tend to be a problem. The only caveat I would say to that is if you park your car under a tree or something that drops a lot of stuff. You regularly come out to your car and your wiper area is covered in like seeds and acorns and leaves and all those kind of things. Something you might want to think about, because they will eventually, the bits of it will sort of crumble up and go under here. So symptoms of that could be, if it was really, really badly draining, you would probably have wet carpets in the footwell, either on the passenger or the driver's side. That can also be an air conditioning draining issue. So when the aircon cools in the car, so the different temperature produces condensation, and there's a pipe under the car which lets that condensation out. If that comes detached under the dashboard, which can happen, then that same condensed water can wet the carpet. I hate water leaks. They're a pain to chase, but it would take quite a lot of debris and matter to block the fronts up. The bigger problem with drainage tends to be at the back. So, which is what I'll show you now, if you like.
Yep.
One thing I will point out, I'm just going to open the fuel filler cap. It's a lesser known drain point, but they can still be an issue. We'll go on that side.
Nope, you're on that side.
Not everybody cleans. Sorry, come on there. Not everybody tends to clean out in this area,
including me,
including Andy in this case. So just make sure it's free flowing. Again, it would have to be seriously jammed up. But if it started to make its way around the cap, or if, I'll show you in a minute, if this pipework was ill-fitting, the next place that any water in this area around this grommet and seal here would be into the boot. So depending on what your concern with blocked drains is, either wet carpets or a wet boot, don't discount this area for leaks. It's surprisingly common. It's surprisingly common to find that you have a gap under here as well, under this piece and the equivalent one on the other side. That can let water in. Rear light seals, even behind the bumper, there's an air balancing flap kind of down this area. You won't see it normally. When you shut the boot, if you've ever taken the bumper off, there's a flap which balances the pressure in the car. That can leak around it as well. But the main cause of wetness is the rear soft top drains, which is really, really hard to show you. Ironically, the easiest thing to show you would be down underneath the car. So as best as we can,
get some light.
Let me get a light.
It's worth mentioning that I had some significant drainage issues on this, and I don't know if you can see that, but there's still quite a lot of damage there underneath there in the tool well. I do intend to replace this at some point, but yeah, it does come through quite quickly there.
Let me show you under the car. I have to go actually underneath the car, so I might take it with me if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Can you shorten the stick for me? Yeah. We're going to travel under the car for the first time today. So sorry, I'm probably going to be a better describer than I am a cameraman, so bear with me a moment. He says. All right, can you see what I'm on about? Can you see there where we are on the where I'm under the car?
No, because you just switched your video off. There we
Sorry
are.
about that. Is it back?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Can
it's
you guys
back.
see it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, I'm going to try and make this focus, but it is surprisingly difficult. So, Andy, you make this look. If you can hold it around a bit further into the car if you can.
Just knock the video off again. There we are.
Sorry, I don't know what it's doing. Can you come? Right, that's good. Right, stay there. Can you see this hole?
Yeah.
So that's the outlet pipe. There's an equivalent one on the other side. So that's where the soft top drain comes out. So if you want to know if you have a problem or not, when the roof's up, obviously, pour a steady stream of water onto the roof and then watch what happens. You won't necessarily be able to get this view of it because you'd obviously have to be under the car without the wheel. But you should watch water pouring out of that at a broadly steady rate. And let's say within about 5 or 6 seconds of you putting, a decent amount of water on it, it shouldn't be pooling by the roof. It should be flowing out freely. Now, if it isn't, it's likely that either this drain or the other side or both of them are blocked. Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can try and poke it and clear it out from the top, which does work to a point, but more success, I've had more success, should I say, actually working it out from the bottom. And I'll show you the tool that I use. I'm just going to come out the car and Andy can be cameraman again.
Just show us where that drain hole is.
Of course, yeah. Right, so I'm underneath the car. Let's chuck us the light, would you? I'll try and. So I'm underneath the car at the moment. So give you a sense of perspective. There's the diff, there's the exhaust. So if you go towards the front of the rear arch, you've got this plastic piece here. Yeah. And if you look just above that, it's difficult to make it focus. Can you see it?
Yeah, got it.
That's it. And it's exactly the same on the other side. So it's just a pipe outlet above a bolt hole. Is that okay? Did you all see that?
Yeah, that was really clear.
Good. Like I say, I know it's filmed anyway. So right. So if you take that, Andy, that one. So what I use is this. I think this is actually a musical instrument like trumpet cleaner or something like that. But this is just basically a stiff bristle brush on a flexible wand, basically. It's very, very difficult to show you where you need to be from the top. Hence the reason I showed you where it was from the bottom first. But where if you want to go from the top, where you need to be, if you pull the brushes back, so these brushes here that clear debris off the mechanism, again, I'd be amazed if we can show this. I actually recommend.
Are we still on?
We're still on?
I think we just lost it. Are we on?
Yeah, back on.
Yeah, we're back on. Sorry, we just dropped out there.
I'd be amazed if you can see this. I'd actually recommend just Googling it or going on the forum. There's some probably better images than I can give you. But down in that gap, you'll see an arm mechanism, the roof arm mechanism. If you can get down to the side of that, it's hard to describe, but the roof drain is like a cup. It's a bit like this. And it goes down into a tube and then out into what you saw at the bottom. So you don't have to be dead accurate with that brush when you're poking it through. It will kind of find its way down there. And depending on how blocked they are, if they're really blocked, and as in you put water on the roof and it's just sitting there, you need to, surprisingly have the roof down. It's difficult to do with the roof up. But you will push that stem through and then leaves and junk and everything else, and you'll get wet feet as well. It's amazing how much water can be held in that little trap. The way that's worked for me is to get a similar implement to that one I just showed you and actually go from the bottom. And if you've got a faithful assistant, as you poke it through, it will come up here. And between the two of you, you can kind of draw it back through and clear it out that way. It's very hard to find your way in there. It's very easy to find your way in there.
So Dan, how is it finding its way into the boot?
So basically, you'd need to take a lot of trim off to explain that. But if it can't drain out properly, it's only a cup when all's said and done. So when that's full, it will flow over the side. The first thing it will do is wet the carpet behind the seat. So that's a good place to check. And because of how water works, it won't stay there very long. It'll all go to the lowest point, which is under the seat normally. So wet carpets, even if they're quite far at the front, can be a symptom of this as well. But by the same token, as you drive along, the accelerative force is throwing everything back. So if you're going over bumps and in certain angles, it will just slosh water over into the boot section. And if you've ever, the easiest way to have a look at it, I mean, we can have a look at it if you want to, is if you take the spare wheel out of your boot. So take the 3 pull clips off. There's like a wing nut that holds the spare wheel in. I'll show you if you're particularly interested. You can see where it would start to make its way in over the rear deck, just below where the roof tip sits and where the soft top sits. I don't know if I've explained that very well, actually, but does that make sense?
We can open the boot and have a look if anyone particularly wants to see that. Are we good with that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
So in conclusion, I would say grab yourself one of those. It's a trumpet or flute cleaner or something like that. I think I got it off eBay. Don't use anything too rigid. Some people go in there with coat hangers and things. It probably will clear it, but anything that's got a sharp end or if it's inflexible, you run the risk of tearing that rubber and you actually poke a hole in it and then you've got another problem. So that's about as intrusive a tool as I'd want to use. You might be able to do it with a longer pipe cleaner and some sort of bristle brush on the end, but try and avoid stuffing anything too abrasive or sharp, because it's just plastic and rubber when all's said and done, and you could crack it, you could damage it. So yeah, try the drain with the roof up. Try a drainage test. Put a decent amount of water on it, a litre or something, and it should be. It'll pull for a bit, and then it should rather quickly soak away. 5-6 seconds. There should be nothing. And while it's doing, you should see a nice clear flow from each side. If you don't see good strong flow, or especially if it sits there with nothing coming out, you've almost certainly got blocked drains. So invest in such a.
Good.
Cool.
Okay. Where should we go next?
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Well,
what can we do?
If I can add something on top, I've been cleaning it by using a compressed air. Just make sure you have some rubber end to the compressed gun, and you can use it as well as something like you mentioned before. It works as well. Yeah, that's a
good point. So you could, I mean, this thing I have on this is kind of a multi-purpose device. I use this for lots. It's a leaf blower. It's nothing more than that really, but you can get different ends on this. And as you just said, if you sort of step it down to an end, a point, you could blow it through with that as well. So yeah, exactly. As long as your pressure's not too high, and you're ready for what might come out the other end, there's no reason why you couldn't do that too if you have access to compressed air or something electronic like this. Yeah, good point.
I think also for maintenance, once you've cleared them and they're clear, you can pour hot water down your roof, like you've just said as a test, because the hot water dissolves mud and grit and grime and tends to flush it through.
Yeah, very good point. I'd say definitely hot water, not boiling. Yeah, hot water can do it. And then you'd be surprised if it really is blocked. When it lets go, you'd be amazed what comes out of it, and even the volume of water it might be holding. Like all corrosion, it won't happen overnight, but if it sits in there for weeks and months, and especially years, you don't know. The time you come to see how much of a problem it's caused is when you've got a hole in your boot floor, which is another very common thing, water pooling in the bottom, because it sits under the tool tray and then under some carpet, the boot insert carpet. You may not even know there's water there, and meanwhile it's eroding the metal that it's sitting in.
I was only aware of it with mine when I lifted the tool tray out and found a lake in the bottom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Anyway, let's give them some insight. Thank you for their points on compressed air and water. They're good. I should have put that in as well.
What do you think we could do in about 20 minutes? Because we're going to try and wrap up for 4:30 if we can, and then get onto some other stuff. Yeah,
I'm the world. You've probably guessed this from this morning's expedition, but I'm terrible with timekeeping. But 20 minutes, I would say it's probably worthwhile just going where the key service points are, how you get to them, and what to watch out for. Unless anyone's got any suggestions, or we can talk about seasonal calipers. Your call.
What's consensus?
Maintenance
or service points. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Let's do it. All right.
Cool. All right. Someone keep an eye on my time. Just say, Dan, you're rabbiting too much because.
So if you can give us a 5-minute warning when we're about to wrap up, that would be great.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, so starting at the front. So if you do what I call a major service, I only really do two kinds of services in S2000s, minor and major. That's not how the book classifies them, but it's just something that I do. Minor is basically just engine oil filter, and an inspection. So you'd go around, you check all the common points, MOT failures, suspension wear, brake lines, tyres, lights, wipers, all of that kind of stuff. You do that at any service. You do a major service, I do everything else. It's over the top. You don't have to do that by any means, so feel free to pick and choose which bits of it you want to do. But I'll talk you through what I call a major service and the things I would change, where to get them from, and if you want to ask anything, let's do it. So starting from the engine bay, again, ignoring the fact that Andy's car is non-standard, you want to change your air filter on a major service. So on a standard S2000, you of course have the standard air box. I think it's 6 drop clips. The lid just lifts off, and within it, you'll find a cone filter on the end of a rubber trunk. You can swap that like for like if you prefer. I rate a K&N replacement filter inside the box for a couple of reasons. First of all, they do, I think, flow better, and they can also be cleaned and re-oiled. So, yeah, they're more expensive than a standard one, but you never have to buy them again. You just have to, what they call recharge, use a filter recharge again. That's if you're running a standard airbox. If you're running aftermarket, then you probably have your own maintenance. This, for instance, is a K&N filter, so this can be cleaned and re-oiled. But change your air filter, either OEM or aftermarket, it's up to you. Next thing you want to be looking at in the engine bay, back here, so primarily in this main area. So you've got 4 spark plugs. Unsurprisingly, it's a four-cylinder engine. If you're running a standard spark plug, it's an NGK item. Try and get that NGK plug. I won't bore you with why, but I found them to be the most reliable. It's a platinum plug, not an iridium plug on a standard car. They're not that expensive if you shop around Euro car parts. Sometimes even eBay comes up. Don't spend more than 40 quid on plugs. I've seen them from unscrupulous sellers for about £25 per plug. So they do not need to spend that much. When you come to do spark plugs, just like the TCT job earlier, nice cold engine, and do not over tighten them. There's a prescribed torque for them, especially when they're new compared to if you take them out for any reason. So change the spark plugs. You'd be amazed how much they wear down over the course of time. While you're working in this area, valve clearances is something I do on the major service. Again, that's a totally different conversation point. But if you're up to date on your maintenance, you're mechanically sympathetic to the car, as in you let it warm up and so on, you might find that between services, you're barely adjusting the valves. There's 16 valves in this engine. It's common to adjust 1 or 2, but if every single service you're having to adjust 16, you're probably doing something wrong, like revving the engine too hard from cold and so on and so forth. So valve clearances and spark plugs is another thing you do on a major service. I do coolant. So draining coolant and changing coolant is it's not difficult in S2000, but there are some things to know. So you've got a plastic drain tap down here, and it's got an aftermarket rad. So it is black, but on a standard rad, it's white. So it's just down here. You can get it from the bottom. Sometimes it's a bit tight, so you might need some grits. So you drain from there. You'll also want to take this. So this whole unit lifts out. This is the overflow bottle. You can lift that out, empty it out, clean it out, and put new coolant in it. You want to fill it. I don't know how well you can see this, but you want to fill it between the min and the max mark. I don't know how clear that is.
Yeah, it's fading out a bit.
There's a min and a max mark. Go halfway and then allow for a bit of adjustment afterwards. There is a block drain bolt. You don't necessarily need to do it. It's under cylinders 3 and 4 on the exhaust manifold. Quite a lot needs to be taken out to get a good straight shot at it. It's kind of to the side of where this blue oil filter is down here. You get a more complete flush if you take it out, but it is a pain in the ass to get to. You need the combination of extensions and swivels and all kinds of things. Don't do it unless you have to. So drain from the rad, change the overflow coolant, and you're mostly be there. When you come to fill it back up, the first thing you want to do is up here on top of the engine. This is a 12mm head. This is actually the bleed bolt. So if you just loosen this slightly, you don't need to take it out. You can see it's got a hole in the top. Hopefully you can. Yep. As you fill in the coolant and the level rises up through the pipes and up through the block and the head, it will start to bubble out of here. And it's also dispelling all the air. So as soon as you start to see bubbles, you're nearly there. And as you start to see a constant stream, maybe put some blue rag or some towel or something under here. As soon as you start to see a constant stream, you've probably dispelled most of the air from the high point in the system. So that's a good one to do. Fill with a funnel. I use a Lissel funnel, which is it's over there. I can see it if you really want to. I can show you if you really want to see it. But it's quite clever because it latches on exactly to this neck, and it has a plunger insert to close it and open it again. You can use a normal funnel, just try not to spill coolant too much, and if you get it on your paint, make sure you clear it off. So that's coolant in the area. There's no power steering fluid because it's an electronic rack, and that leaves just the engine itself. So do the engine and the oil filter. Don't over tighten sump bolts. I know there's someone mentioned that earlier. The type of oil pan you have on this, you really don't want to over tighten that. Use a specified torque or by feel if you've got a feel for that kind of thing. Always renew the crush washer. Honda, if you buy it from a Honda dealer, if you buy it from Cox or Hendy or wherever, they tend to throw in the 14mm crush washer as well. Do change that. Don't leave that. Sometimes they're really quite stuck on the thread, so just leave it off with a screwdriver and then retorque. The oil filter, there's a special tool for doing the oil filter, and there's a special sequence. Lots of horror stories about oil filters backing off and oil spraying everywhere and fires and wrecked engines. If you use a moderate or even the correct amount of torque, that won't be an issue. I'm not disparaging anyone that uses oil filter stoppers, which is basically a Jubilee clip and a bracket. But in my experience, and I've tracked S2000s quite a lot, and I've worked on a few more, it's never been an issue if you talk them to spec. If anyone wants to, rather than me tell you something you maybe don't want to know, I've got an oil filter over there and the tool. If we have time at the end, I'll show you exactly the tightening sequence to do an oil filter. Even if you don't have the tool, there's numbers on it to tell you how much you've tightened it, like 1/8 of a turn, for instance. We'll cover that if you want to. Should we have a look under the car? It's quite easy to see on S2000, so if you come around here, man.
Ian, I just have to nip away. Oh, Ian's got a Sainsbury's delivery. He'll be back.
Cool. Right, if we look under the car, I'll go right underneath. If you want to drain the engine oil, I'm just going to climb under a little bit. So here is your drain bolt. Andy has a magnetic one, so it's just catching any swarf or anything that's in there. So this is a 14, but standard they're a 17mm. You want to drain, always drain oil with a hot engine. It's thinner, it flows better. So take a note of the safety precautions, obviously, drain into a pan, wear eye protection and hand protection and, all the safety things you might want to do. But yeah, so that's where you'll drain from, and you can actually get the oil filter from the top. But if you really can't do that for some reason, you can catch it from up there as well. It's going to be difficult to show, but yeah, let's see if I can do it.
See if you can do that.
Yeah, so there's the oil filter. When you come to put the oil filter in place, there's an O-ring on it. So use a small smear of oil, just like we did with the TCT, so it doesn't snag, and don't over tighten it. And that's most of what you want to do at the front end. The other things I'll show you up here will be clutch fluid and brake fluid. How are we doing for time? 10 minutes past at the moment. So up here, you have Andy's got some snazzy socks. I'm just going to take them off for a moment. So this is the brake fluid reservoir and the brake fluid, the master cylinder and the brake booster. And this smaller one down here is the clutch fluid reservoir. So both of these need bleeding on a major service. It's more of a job to talk you through how to bleed brakes and bleed the clutch, so I won't, unless you really want me to. But I recommend changing both of these on a major service. So the brake fluid is bled from each corner caliper, and the clutch, lots of different ways you can do it, but the most common is to bleed it from the slave cylinder, which is under the car, which I can show you in a moment. And that's really all you'll want to be changing or doing in the engine bay. One of your checks will be the auxiliary belt, but again, that's another job. There's more to it than that, but you can remove it quite easily. Check it for cracks or frays or splitting or anything like that. If it squeals or if it screeches, you can check the tensioner and so on and so forth. But it's not a routine change item, and until you sort of get a few miles on the car, so check at the service, not a change.
Should we show people the position of the pollen filter in case they want to do that as well?
Yeah. That's a good point. That is still in the engine bay technically. Yep. So underneath this scuttle cover, this part here we were looking at earlier, there is a round pollen filter insert. In fact, watch that, one I made earlier. This is for a certain S2000 service I've got to do in a moment. Show you that. So this is not a Honda OEM one. This is a Eurocar Box one, but filter like this, I'm not too worried. So if you take this cover off, you need to undo a 14mm here, holding the wiper on, and a 14mm there, holding the other wiper on. A top tip before you do that: where the wipers park on the windscreen, as in where they sit, lay a strip of tape out above the blade or below it, and that way you can put it back on exactly where it came off, because these are on a spline, and it is possible to have it too far anti-clockwise or too far clockwise, if that makes sense. So you need to remove those. And then under here, there's a little expanding clips. I'll see if I can do one with my hand. It's sometimes a tool. Here you got it. So you'll find these clips all the way along the top, and just put it back in. So they're expanding clips, and they go into the holes along the various parts of the location, and then the T-shape interlocks with the rubber. So just reach underneath and basically free them all off. I'm going to put that one back in. Once you've done that, with a little bit of persuasion, it's also recommended to not have the bonnet in this upper position, have it in just the open position. Just look. You'll be able to wiggle and finagle this out, and then you'll see this particular part of the filter sitting in a little housing. It just lifts out, put it in, make sure it's secure. And that's the cabin filter done. That's all you need to do on an S2KUK. But that really only needs gearbox oil and differential oil as part of the change item. You can check more. You should check more. The change items, I'll show you later. I might need to draw the plate. Yep. You're going underneath again? Yeah, I'll go under from the front, actually.
All right. Just apologies for the shaky camera work there. I'm just adjusting. Right.
Thank you. Any questions up top before I disappear under?
Yeah, sorry, I had to leave for a minute. I took take a phone call. You may have covered it, but what? I said I had to leave.
Any questions on the engine bay?
Yeah. What's your recommendation on hydraulic fluid?
As in which one to use?
No, how often to change it?
Oh, right. See, for me, I would do a major service on every second year. So I wouldn't leave mine in there for more than 2 years. But again, if you track your car, particularly on the brakes, you'll probably want to do it yearly. One thing that is worth getting is, see if I can find it.
Vacuum bleed kit.
Yeah, a bleed kit, definitely, but is one of these. So this is a very, very cheap, very simple brake fluid testing kit. So it's very simple. You put the probe in the bag into the brake fluid or the clutch fluid, and it will tell you the moisture level that you have. You don't need a lot of moisture because brake fluid is hygroscopic, so it absorbs moisture. And you want to change that more often than not. So I would do it every other year.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah.
Super. But yeah, as I said, if you track, then you'll probably you want to do it more often than that, basically. Or if you've got a higher powered car and you're getting your brakes hotter, you'll know. If you have spongy pedal, then you probably need to do it. So right. I said to you I was going to go under the front. I'm actually going to go to the diff first. So I'm going under the rear of the car. I just need my light. Yeah, where's that light gone? Oh, cheers. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. Right, I'll show you the differential fluid change, and then I'll show you the gearbox fluid change. So bear with me a second. So, can you all still see okay?
Yes.
Good stuff. Yeah. Okay. So on the diff itself, the differentials in these are very, robust unit. They're very well up to the job that they have to deal with in a standard car, at least. They can come apart slightly in turbocharged or supercharged applications, particularly if you do a lot of drag racing or you're a bit hard on it. But normally they're okay. So you'll want to be checking just for leaks when you come underneath here. The most common places to leak from will either be up here, which is the fill bolt. That's where you put the fluid back in. We'll come to that in a second. Or the drain bolt. There's a crush washer underneath both of those. And if you get a leak from that area, it's almost certainly either not been tightened enough or they've reused the washer and it can no longer do a good enough job of sealing. Or if you're really, really unlucky, like one guy I helped, I think about a year ago, that had also been over tightened and it had pulled the thread out basically, which was a bit of a nightmare. So if you don't have either of those problems from the bolts, that's great. You'll want to have a quick look up at each drive shaft. I'll try and show you that. Not easy. Well, I don't know if you can see. So I'm looking at, so if you look at the differential here and then try and look at the hang on, sorry, bear with me. It's very difficult to show. So I don't know if you can see right at the top here, where my finger is, that's the output seal for the driver's side drive shaft. Any oil around this area, because gravity dictates it will run back down, that's going to be a seal leaking from that area. You have another one at the other side, and if it wasn't that, you'd want to check the center drive shaft, or the prop shaft in old language itself. So if we look at the drive shaft, where the input, and I'm going to get the word in now just for you, Ian, the flange, where it goes to, if you found weeping from this area, that would almost certainly be a failed seal there as well. With regards to servicing it, as you'd imagine, the first and foremost thing to do with the diff and the gearbox is you want to undo the filler bolt first. Very, very important. If you undo the drain bolt first and then find for some reason it's been rounded off or whatever reason, you can't undo the filler bolt, you're stuck, because there's no way of getting the fluid back in through the drain hole by definition. You'd have to probably end up taking the differential out. So if you undo this, off the top of my head, this is a 23 millimeter, and this is a 24. So once that breaks free, you can leave it in there, and then you'll want to undo this. Make sure the diff is hot. This fluid is very, very gloopy. It's like syrup, particularly when it's old. It comes out into like honey, basically. The warmer it is, the more easily it will flow. It also has quite a distinct aroma as well. I wouldn't describe it as particularly evocative, but different strokes and all that. So once you drain out of this takes about 900 mil, something like that. So you only usually need a 1 litre bottle, which is handy because that's what Honda sells it in. Unless you're a bit clumsy and you spill some. So drain it all out, replace the washer. You can get that online. Torque this up to spec. I'm afraid I can't remember what the spec is, but it's not excessively tight. And then to fill, you could buy another tool, which I'll show you when I come out from under the car. It's basically just a hand-operated pump. I think it's from Draper, the one I use, but there's lots of different ones. And you just want to keep filling this up. Now, if you make sure the car is level, like mine is at the moment, it's on a quick jack, but if you use axle stands or something, try and get the car as level as you can and, be safe while you're underneath it. You want to fill this up till the fluid starts to run back out. That means you filled it to a certain level. And then that's all you need in it. It can be slightly over, just get the bolt back in and closed up and torqued up, that's fine. That's also a good indication. If you undo this filler bolt before you start the drain, if fluid comes out, that means you've got enough. If nothing comes out, it was possibly a little bit low. That's all I really need to show you for the diff. Any questions while I'm back here, or should we go have a look at the gearbox?
Look at the gearbox.
Look at the gearbox. Okay. Yeah. Right, gearbox is up the front of the car. So then I'm going to do my slidey bit while I'm on a crawler. So excuse me a second. Okay. This is even less room under here to maneuver, but I'll do my best. So I've just slid from the back of the car, which is where we're looking right now, the feet obviously, to the front, or more at the front. So you probably know the S2000's engine is pretty far back in the engine bay. So this is where the engine ends, and this is where the gearbox starts, if that makes sense to you. And what we're concerning ourselves with is on the passenger side, for UK cars obviously, is where the drain and the fill bolts are. Right, that's lighting is exactly the wrong place. If that's focusing okay, so here's your fill bolt, 17 millimeter. And here's your drain bolt. And he's got a magnetic aftermarket one on here, so this is 14 mil as well. What you normally find in this location is a square internal drive 3/8 inch one. You don't need a special square bit for this. You can actually just use the drive of a 3/8 ratchet, unsurprisingly. It will interface with that perfectly, and it'll undo. Washers to replace here as well. Cox or Hendy or wherever you buy your stuff from, they sell them as a pair. So there's a gearbox drain and fill kit, and there's a differential drain and fill kit. It's not expensive, couple of quid. Don't reuse washers unless you absolutely have to. Same principles apply back here. So you'll want to loosen the filler first and see if anything comes out, and then do your drain. Again, better when it's hot. The fluids are not the same. The gearbox uses Honda's MTF, manual transmission fluid, which is the same as all Honda manual transmissions. The diff oil is specific to the S2000. It's very similar to some other models, but it's not to be confused with the one that you use in the rear diff of a CRV. A lot of Honda dealers don't seem to know that,
which is frustrating. But the CRV one is called DPF, dual pump fluid. And the one we're using this is called, I think it's got HGO3 on it these days. It's a hypoid gear oil. Very, very important to make that distinction. Don't mix the two up. This will take, the gearbox will take around 2.5 litres. So you'll want to buy 3 litres, 3 1-litre bottles. And the same principle applies. Get it on the level. Obviously, make sure your drain bolt is back in when you've got it all out. And fill to the same level till it starts to run back out. And that's about it. Only other thing I'll show you while I'm here, if I can get the lighting right. 4 minutes, Andy tells me. This, under this sort of rubber cover, is the clutch slave. So it's not very easy to show you with the lighting that I have. So I apologise for the terrible camera work. But the
5-minute warning.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers. So yeah, fluid comes down this pipe when you press the clutch, goes into the slave. It operates a piston that way, which moves a fork inside the gearbox, which releases the clutch. When you come to bleed the fluid, just above now, I have no idea if you can see that or not, this is the bleed nipple. It's exactly the same as you'd find on the brakes, slightly smaller, but the same principle. You'll have a faithful assistant working the pedal. You'll open this and bleed the clutch fluid out. Just one way of doing it. And that is pretty much it for the main service items. I've probably forgotten something, but that is all I would be thinking about. There's lots of other things to check while we're along the way, but that's the main items. Quick questions while I've got 2 or 3 minutes left.
I've got a question. Are there any more rude words that apply to a car? I mean, we've got like nipples, nuts, flanges.
Penetrating.
In my opinion, I'm own domestic, so we invented the swear word. But I would say if you ever want to embarrass someone, invite them round for a brake bleeding, or especially a brake change job. There's pumping, there's nipples, it's hard, it's firm, is it up? All of those kind of things. It's a superb medley of doodle entendres. So, but yeah, and you don't have a rusty flange either. Your big ends can be gone. Your big ends can be knocking. You don't want that. Yeah, and there's a radiator drain cock, as we talked about earlier. So, it's all there if you want to fill an afternoon with it.
Brilliant.
And that's, I think, about it for the main set. I mean, it's very whistle-stop tour, but if it gave you an idea of where things are and what you might want to be looking for, then I hope that's been useful.
Guys, I think you've done an absolutely amazing job. Great. Absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. It's been really, really good, really interesting. And not only the guys watching it on Google, but the people on YouTube Live as well have been watching it. So it's good. It's brilliant. I appreciate you taking the time and, doing what you do and sharing your knowledge. Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
No, thank you. So thank you for everybody watching. Thanks, Andy, for letting me rip his car apart.
You're still got to put it back together again.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm going indoors for beer now.
No, Andy can put it back together because he's been watching you do it. So he's learned from you.
It's like an acid test now. How much have you learned?
You're staying under that car unless you're careful.
Andy's providing beer. Don't drink it.
We want to know if it still TC ticks when you start it up.
Should we find out?
Yeah, should we do
that?
Yeah.
Now, if there's any police officers or VOS, DVLA, DVSA people running, what you didn't see was me take Andy's catalytic converter off and put a decat on. He always runs a cat when he goes out on the road. I mentioned this because if I'm open the garage door, or what you'll find is 3 corpses after about half minute because it stinks. Is there any reason we shouldn't start this?
No tools in the engine bay.
No.
You put the TCT back in properly.
Anything else?
I'm just making sure there's no spanners down here in the belts or anything. Right, we're just opening the garage door up, and then we'll fire it up.
Stick it in you. Oh, is it in there? Should
Okay.
One thing before he does it, it is quite common to hear a slight tick when it starts because the TCT's got to fill the
first time, yeah.
If you're still doing it after 10 minutes, then I haven't fixed it.
Tick 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 tick.
It's really hard to get decent engine sound from a phone.
Yeah, it sounded all right from our end.
It sounded like a bag of spanners, so yeah, it's ruined.
I'm so impressed, guys. You've done such a brilliant job.
Yeah, amazing.
No, so thanks to Andy. I was going to show you all of this on my own car, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So so this was a good plan B. But I hope you've enjoyed it and you learned something. And it's not the end of question time. I'm on the forum quite a lot. You can just DM me or.
I guess people can ask on the Google channel throughout the rest of the Megameet weekend. You got any questions?
Yeah, please do. So the internet's so full of people doing this kind of thing. You won't be far away from it. Everything I've said today is my own experience, but there's lots of more to it. So ask them or ask me.
Right, I reckon it's beer time.
Yeah, I've got to put this shit back together.
Yeah, it's definitely beer time.
Just
right, guys. We'll catch up with you a bit later.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
No worries.
Thank you. Cheers, man. Cheers, Andy. Many thanks.
Right, so what we're going to do now, have a break for a bit.
Have a break. What time's Honda Pro Jason coming? Was it 7:30?
7. Let me check his message.
I've got a feeling it's at 8 o'clock on my email. Let's find out.
Let me check his message.
Was that from Stig of the Dump?
So the email says 7:30 Honda Pro Jason with pre-dinner drinks, chat and a Q&A.
Yeah, and I've
so why don't we? I mean, we can
to remind him before as well. So this is open. If anyone wants to go on here, have a chat, mess around, share their screen, show some stuff, more than happy for people to do that. It's yours to use, so feel free. It doesn't close.
We might pop in at 5:30 again and share some more videos.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Yeah, and I'm going to stick a
give
few
ourselves a
videos
break.
on YouTube as well whilst I'm just having this quick break.
Cool. All right, well, we'll see folks later. I mean, I'm probably going to stay on here for a bit because I'm just uploading stuff to Facebook, but we'll come back in an hour and share more stuff.
I'll stick around as well, but I might not be very active on here. Cool.
Thanks,
right,
everyone.
We'll catch you later.
Cheers, guys.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you in a bit.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.